Beloved chosen one, before another word is spoken, I want you to sit still for a moment and simply receive this truth. You did not open this message by accident. You did not stumble upon these words while scrolling through 1,000 other things that meant nothing to your soul. No, chosen one, there is a reason your heart led you here today. And that reason has a name, and that name is God. He has been watching you. He has seen every quiet tear you cried when no one else was in the room. He has seen every night you lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if your prayers were even reaching heaven anymore. He has seen the weight you have carried, the disappointment you have swallowed, the hope you have tried so hard to keep alive, even when everything around you seemed to be telling you to let it go. And today, God's chosen one, He is not sending you another vague whisper. He is not sending you another maybe. He is sending you something final. A note written not in ink but in mercy. A message sealed not with wax, but with love that has never once wavered, even when your faith felt weak. I want you to imagine, just for a moment, that heaven itself has grown quiet, the way a room grows quiet right before someone important is about to speak. Imagine the noise of your worries, your bills, your fears, your unanswered questions, all fading into the background. And in that stillness, imagine a voice, ancient and yet somehow closer than your own breath, saying your name. Not shouting it, not scolding it, speaking it the way a father speaks the name of a child he has missed dearly. That is what this message is. It is not a lecture. It is not a list of everything you have done wrong. It is a final note, written across the pages of eternity, and it says one thing above all else. You are chosen, you are seen, and you are not forgotten. Perhaps you are wondering why the word final appears in this message today. Perhaps that word feels heavy to you, almost frightening, as if something is ending. But hear me clearly, beloved. When God calls something final, it does not always mean an ending. Sometimes it means a conclusion to your suffering. Sometimes it means the final page of a chapter that has been far too long, far too painful, far too silent. Sometimes final simply means enough. Enough waiting, enough wandering, enough wondering if you matter. Today, God is closing the chapter of your doubt and opening the one of your deliverance. And He wanted this note to reach you personally, not as a general blessing scattered across the crowd, but as a direct word meant only for you. You may be someone who has been praying the same prayer for years now. You whisper it in the morning before the sun rises, and you whisper it again at night when the house has gone silent and everyone else is asleep. You have asked God for breakthrough. You have asked Him for healing. You have asked Him to bring back what was lost, to restore what was broken, to answer what has felt like an endless silence. And somewhere along the way, if you are honest with yourself, a small voice inside began to whisper that maybe He was not listening anymore. Maybe your prayers had grown too old, too repetitive, too small to matter in the vastness of heaven. Chosen one, I need you to release that lie right now, because it was never true. Not for one single day, not for one single hour. God has heard every syllable, every sigh, every unspoken ache that never even made it into words. And this final message today is His way of proving it to you. There is an old truth found in the book of Psalms, chapter 34, verse 18, which tells us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Read that again slowly. Close, not distant, not far off, watching from some unreachable throne. Close as your own heartbeat, as close as the breath filling your lungs in this very moment. If your spirit feels crushed today, if your heart feels like it has been broken one too many times, this is not a sign that God has stepped away from you. It is the opposite. It is the very moment He promises to draw nearest. I want to speak now about the word chosen. because I think many people misunderstand what it truly means. Being chosen was never about being flawless. It was never about having your life perfectly arranged, your finances secure, your relationships healed, your body free from pain. Being chosen means that in the middle of your mess, in the middle of your unanswered questions, in the middle of your weariness, God looked at you and said, "This one, not the one who has everything figured out, not the one who never struggles, you, with your doubts, with your scars, with your unfinished story." He looked at you and said, "This one is mine, and I am not finished with this one yet." Think about how many people throughout history were chosen not because they were the strongest, the wealthiest, or the most confident, but because God saw something in them that they could not yet see in themselves. A shepherd boy became a king. A stuttering man became a deliverer of nations. A foreign widow became part of the very lineage of the Messiah. If God could do such things with ordinary, broken, uncertain people, do you truly believe He cannot do something extraordinary with you as well? This message today is not meant to simply comfort you for a moment and then fade away like so many words do. It is meant to awaken something inside you, something that may have gone quiet after years of disappointment. Maybe you used to pray with fire in your voice, and somewhere along the way that fire dimmed to a flicker. Maybe you used to believe boldly, and somewhere along the way, life taught you to believe cautiously instead, keeping your expectations low, so the disappointment would not hurt so much if it came again. I understand why you built that wall. Pain teaches us to protect ourselves. But chosen one, hear me clearly. That wall you built to protect your heart from disappointment may also be the very thing keeping you from receiving the breakthrough that is already on its way to you. Today, we are going to walk together through an ancient story, one filled with drought, silence, doubt, and finally, an undeniable answer from heaven. It is the story of a prophet named Elijah, standing alone on a mountain called Carmel, surrounded by people who mocked his faith and a sky that had not released rain in over 3 years. It is a story about waiting so long that hope itself begins to feel foolish. It is a story about standing firm when everyone around you has already given up. And, most importantly, it is a story about what happens when God finally, decisively, unmistakably answers. As we walk through this story together, I want you to place your own life beside it. Wherever you feel dry, wherever you feel forgotten, wherever you feel like the heavens above you have gone silent, hold that place gently in your heart, because by the end of this message, I believe you will see it differently. I believe you will see that the very silence you feared was never emptiness. It was preparation. It was the quiet before the fire fell. So breathe deeply now, chosen one. Let your shoulders relax. Let your grip on your own strength loosen just a little, because you were never meant to carry this alone. Whatever brought you here today, whatever ache led you to press play on this message, know that it was not random. It was ordained. God has a final note for you today, and it is not a note of rejection. It is not a note of punishment. It is a note of love, written across the sky, waiting to fall upon your life like fire upon a soaked altar, undeniable, unmistakable, and utterly transforming. Stay with me now, because the story we are about to enter was written thousands of years ago. Yet it carries a message that was reserved, quietly and patiently, for a moment exactly like this one, for a heart exactly like yours. If what you are feeling right now has been sitting quietly in your chest, waiting for someone to name it, I want to invite you to press like so. This message can reach the next chosen one who is searching for exactly these words. Leave something in the comments, even just one word, because when you do, you are not just marking that you were here, You are becoming part of a community of chosen ones who are speaking into each other's silence from every corner of the world. Share this with one person who has been struggling quietly and has not said so. And if this is the kind of message you want to find you again, subscribe so the next one does not pass you by. There is also a donation link in the pinned comment below, and if you feel moved, what you leave there does not support a channel. It carries this light to someone who has not found it yet. To understand the weight of what God is saying to you today, we must travel back to a dry and dust-covered land, to a time when the nation of Israel had turned its heart away from the living God and toward a false god named Baal. The king of that land, a man named Ahab, had married a woman named Jezebel, and together they had led the people into worship of idols carved by human hands, idols that could not see, could not hear, and could not save. Because of this great turning away, God allowed a drought to fall upon the land, a drought so severe that it lasted for 3.5 long years. Imagine that. Not 3.5 weeks, not 3.5 months, 3.5 years without rain. The rivers dried into cracked pathways. The fields that once grew golden with grain became brittle and lifeless. Livestock perished. Families grew desperate. Hope, that fragile and precious thing, began to wither along with the land itself. In the middle of this famine, God sent a prophet named Elijah, a man who had already spoken boldly against the wickedness of the king, declaring that no rain or dew would fall except by his word. For 3.5 years, Elijah lived in hiding, first by a brook called Kerith, where ravens brought him bread and meat morning and evening, and later in the household of a poor widow whose jar of flour and jug of oil never ran dry, no matter how much she used, exactly as God had promised. Even hiding, even in scarcity, God was faithfully sustaining his chosen servant, though the outward circumstances looked like nothing but famine and silence. Then, after all this waiting, God spoke to Elijah again and told him it was time to show himself to Ahab, time to bring rain back upon the land. But before the rain would fall, there had to be a confrontation, a moment of undeniable truth. Elijah summoned the king, and through him, the people of Israel gathered upon a mountain called Carmel. Elijah also summoned 450 prophets of the false god Baal, along with 400 prophets of another idol named Asherah, men who had been feeding at the king's table while the true prophets of God were hunted and silenced. Standing before this enormous crowd, Elijah spoke words that still echo across the centuries. He asked the people how long they would waver between two opinions, saying that if the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal is God, follow him. And the people, caught between fear and confusion, said nothing at all. Silence answered him. This is important, beloved, because so many of us today live in that same silence, caught between what we know to be true and what our fear tells us is safer to believe. The people on that mountain were not evil people. They were simply worn down, confused, uncertain who to trust after years of hardship. Perhaps you understand that feeling more than you would like to admit. Elijah then proposed a test. 2 altars would be built, one for the prophets of Baal and one for himself, representing the Lord. A bull would be placed upon each altar, but no fire would be lit beneath either one. Instead, each side would call upon their god, and whichever god answered by sending fire down from heaven to consume the offering, that god would be proven true. The prophets of Baal went first. From morning until midday, they cried out, dancing around their altar, pleading with their false god to answer. Nothing happened. Elijah, without cruelty but with piercing honesty, suggested perhaps their god was deep in thought, perhaps he was away on a journey, perhaps he was sleeping and needed to be awakened. Still nothing. The prophets grew more desperate. cutting themselves with swords and spears, a common ritual of the time meant to summon a god's attention through blood and pain. Still, complete silence answered them. Hour after hour, nothing but wind moving across a dry and empty sky. Now imagine the tension of that moment. Imagine the mockery in the eyes of those watching. Imagine how it must have felt to be Elijah, the lone prophet of the true God, standing against nearly 900 voices, calling out to something that gave no response at all. It would have been so easy for Elijah to doubt in that moment. It would have been so easy to wonder if he had misheard God, if he had made a terrible mistake in gathering everyone here for what might become public humiliation. But Elijah did not waver, because he was not standing on the strength of his own confidence. He was standing on the certainty of who God had already proven himself to be. Through the ravens that fed him, through the flour that never ran out, through every quiet miracle that had already carried him through the drought. When evening approached, Elijah rebuilt the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. He took 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, and used them to rebuild what had been broken. This detail matters greatly, beloved, because before fire ever fell from heaven, restoration had to happen first. The broken altar had to be rebuilt before it could hold the offering. So often in our own lives, restoration comes before revelation. God rebuilds what has crumbled inside us before He reveals the fullness of His answer. Elijah then dug a trench around the altar, placed the wood and the offering upon it, and did something that seemed almost reckless. He asked for 4 large jars of water to be poured over the offering, not once but 3 times, until the water ran down and filled the trench completely. Why would a man desperate for fire soak everything in water? Because Elijah wanted there to be absolutely no question about what was about to happen. He wanted it undeniable, unmistakable, impossible to explain away as coincidence or trickery. Then Elijah prayed, not a long, desperate, repetitive prayer like the prophets before him. A short, humble, confident prayer, asking God to answer so that the people would know that He alone was the true God and that He was turning their hearts back to Himself. And in that moment, fire fell from heaven. Not ordinary fire. Fire so intense that it consumed the offering, the wood, the stones, the dust, and even licked up every drop of water in the trench. When the people saw it, they fell to the ground crying out that the Lord He is God, the Lord He is God. This is found in the book of 1 Kings chapter 18, and the story continues in verse 45, where after all of this, the sky grew black with clouds, the wind rose, and heavy rain finally fell upon the land after 3.5 years of drought. The very thing the people had been waiting for, longing for, nearly giving up hope for, arrived suddenly, dramatically, undeniably, right after God proved Himself faithful through fire. Beloved chosen one, I want you to see something powerful in this ancient account. The fire came before the rain. The undeniable proof of God's presence came before the tangible relief the people had been longing for. So often we want the rain first. We want the relief, the answer, the breakthrough, before we are willing to believe that God is truly present with us. But God often works the opposite way. He reveals Himself first, so that when the rain finally falls, we know without a shadow of doubt that it was Him all along, and not chance, not luck, not coincidence. This story was not preserved for thousands of years, simply as an interesting piece of ancient history. It was preserved because there would be a chosen one, exactly like you, standing centuries later in a season of personal drought, wondering if heaven had gone silent, wondering if anyone was still listening. And God knew that on this very day, you would need to hear that even after 3.5 years, even after the driest, most exhausting season, fire still fell. Rain still came. The silence was never the end of the story. It was simply the space before the answer. There is something the science has been quietly confirming for decades. Something that the spiritual community has known long before the laboratories caught up. The people who carry a divine calling, the ones who have been set apart, the ones who feel that unfinished ache in their ordinary mornings, they do not just think differently from the crowd. They are wired differently, not metaphorically, not poetically. Literally, at the level of electrical frequency inside the brain, the chosen ones operate on a different signal. Researchers in the field of neuroscience have spent years studying the brains of individuals who demonstrate exceptional creativity, deep intuition, rapid learning, and what can only be described as an almost supernatural ability to solve problems and generate ideas that others cannot access. And what they found, consistently across study after study, is that these individuals share a common neurological signature. Their brains produce elevated levels of a specific frequency called gamma waves. Gamma is not a spiritual concept borrowed from science. Gamma is the measurable, recordable, observable electrical activity of a brain that is operating at its highest capacity. It is the frequency of breakthrough. It is the frequency of revelation. It is the frequency that fires in the brain during what scientists call eureka moments. Those sudden flashes of clarity, where everything that was tangled and unclear suddenly arranges itself into perfect understanding. And here is what makes this remarkable for you specifically. The brain state associated with gamma is also deeply connected to theta waves, the frequency that dominates the brain of a child under the age of 7. A frequency associated with creativity, intuition, deep receptivity, and spiritual openness. Children learn at a rate that adults cannot match. They absorb language, pattern, meaning, and possibility with an effortlessness that seems almost miraculous. And the neurological reason, is that their brains are spending far more time in theta than an adult brain typically does. As we age, as the world trains us to be practical and guarded and analytical, we drift away from that open, receptive, creative frequency. We move into the narrower bandwidth of beta, the frequency of stress and surface thinking, and the kind of mental noise that keeps you awake at 3 in the morning going over the same problem, without ever reaching a solution. But here is the truth that changes everything. You do not have to stay there. That frequency, that theta-gamma connection, that neurological signature of the chosen, and the gifted and the divinely aligned, it can be restored, it can be reactivated, and it does not require years of meditation, practice, or expensive retreats or a complete overhaul of your daily life. It requires 7 minutes, 7 intentional, precisely calibrated minutes that work with the natural architecture of your brain to bring you back in alignment with the frequency you were created to carry. This is where the work of Dr. James Rivers becomes important for you to understand. Dr. Rivers is a neuroscientist with over 30 years of dedicated research into the relationship between sound, frequency, and human brain function. His work has connections to some of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, including research frameworks developed in partnership with MIT and NASA, institutions that are not in the business of guessing, that deal only in what can be measured and proven and replicated. Dr. Rivers spent the better part of 3 decades asking a question that most of his peers were not bold enough to pursue openly. What if the brain could be guided back into its highest performing state simply through sound? Not through drugs, not through surgery, not through years of disciplined mental training, but through specifically engineered audio frequencies that speak directly to the brain in the only language it has always understood, which is the language of vibration and resonance. The answer he found, after thousands of hours of research and refinement, is called the genius wave. And before I explain what it is, I want you to think back to what we talked about in the first part of this message. That 7-minute window of quiet in the morning, that space before the world rushes in, that moment where something in you is already leaning toward a truth it has not yet heard. That 7 minutes is not coincidental. Dr. Rivers discovered that 7 minutes is the precise window within which the brain can achieve deep, sustainable entrainment with theta and gamma frequencies without triggering the mental fatigue that comes from flush sessions. 7 minutes is not a convenience. 7 minutes is science. And it lines up with the spiritual instinct that has been directing your mornings in a way that should give you pause. The Genius Wave is a 7-minute audio track built on the principles of brainwave entrainment, using binaural beats and isochronic tones, sound frequencies calculated with scientific precision to guide your brain from its default stressed and scattered state into the theta-gamma alignment that activates your hippocampus, sharpens your cognitive processing, opens your creative channels, and produces the kind of mental clarity that most people assume is only available to the naturally gifted. You put on your headphones, you press play. You do not need to concentrate. You do not need to meditate. You do not need any special skill or prior experience. The audio does the work because it is designed to work with the brain you already have. Now let me tell you about some of the people who already experienced this, because their stories matter for where you are right now. A woman who had been struggling with mental fog and creative paralysis for over a year, unable to move forward in her career despite knowing she had more to offer, began using the Genius Wave every morning for 7 minutes before she looked at her phone or opened her email. Within 3 weeks, she told us that ideas she had been chasing for months started arriving on their own. She landed a client she had been pursuing for nearly a year, and she said the conversation felt different, like she was finally operating from a place of clarity instead of anxiety. Another person, a man who had been stuck in the same financial situation for years, despite working hard and trying every productivity system he could find, said that after 30 days of consistent use, he made a decision he had been too foggy and fearful to make for a long time, and that decision opened a door he had given up believing would ever open. These are not extraordinary people who had resources and advantages others lacked. These are people who were exactly where you may be right now, carrying more potential than their current circumstances were reflecting, waiting for something to shift at the level where the shift actually needed to happen. I know that some of you are sitting with a thought right now, and I want to speak to it directly before we go any further. You are thinking that $39 is not nothing. You are right. It is not nothing. And if money is genuinely tight for you in this season, I want you to know that I see that. And this message is not designed to pressure you into something that creates hardship. But I also want you to consider this honestly. $39 is less than most people spend in a single week on things that do nothing for the frequency they carry or the future they are trying to build. $39 is the current price of a tool that was developed over 30 years and normally offered at $49, and it is available at that reduced price right now through the link in the pinned comment below this video for a limited time that is not guaranteed to extend. The normal price is $49. Right now, through the specific link that has been pinned in the comment section of this video, you can access the Genius Wave for only $39. And every purchase comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, not 30 days. 90 days. That is 3 full months to use this audio every morning, to live inside the shift it creates, and to decide with your own experience whether it delivers what it promises. If it does not, you contact the team and you receive every dollar back. No questions, no difficulty, no fine print. The risk is not on you. The risk is on the product, and the product is confident enough in what it does to carry that guarantee. Now, I need to say something important, and I need you to hear it clearly. There are counterfeit versions of this product circulating on other platforms and through unofficial links. They are not the same product. They are not built on the same research. They do not carry the same guarantee. And using an unauthorized version is not just a waste of your money. It is a waste of the moment you are standing in right now. The only safe, verified, guaranteed access to the authentic Genius Wave is through the single link pinned in the comments below this video. That is the only place. Do not purchase from anywhere else. Do not trust any other link, regardless of what it promises or how legitimate it looks. The pinned comment is the door. Everything else is a distraction designed to keep you from the real thing. And I want you to understand something about timing. The $39 price point is not permanent. It is a window, and windows close. The number of units available at this price is limited by design, and when that limit is reached, the price returns to $49 without notice. This is not a pressure tactic. This is simply the structure of the offer, and I would rather you know it plainly than discover it too late. If this message has reached something in you today, if the science resonates and the stories connect, and something in your spirit is leaning forward, then act on that leaning now. Go to the pinned comment, click the link. Take the step that your ordinary morning was not going to take for you. You were chosen for frequency, and the frequency is available right now. Now let us sit with this story a little longer, beloved, because behind every historical detail lies a spiritual truth meant to speak directly into your life today. The drought that fell upon Israel was not simply a physical famine. It was also a picture of spiritual dryness, a season where the people had turned away from the source of living water and had instead tried to sustain themselves through empty idols that could never truly satisfy. Perhaps, chosen one, you have felt a similar dryness in your own life. Not necessarily a turning away from God through worship of carved images, but a slow drifting, a subtle exhaustion, where prayer began to feel routine instead of alive, where hope began to feel like a memory instead of a present reality. This is more common than you might think, and it does not make you unworthy. It makes you human. What God is saying through this story is that seasons of dryness are never wasted seasons. Even during those 3.5 years when no rain fell, God was still active. He was still providing for Elijah through ravens and through a widow's jar that never emptied. He was still preparing the exact moment when he would reveal himself undeniably. The dryness was not evidence of God's absence. It was the backdrop against which his presence would soon shine even brighter. If you are in a season right now where everything around you feels dry, where your finances feel stretched thin, where your body feels weary, where your relationships feel strained, I want you to hear this clearly. This dryness is not proof that God has forgotten you. It may very well be the exact preparation ground for the fire that is about to fall in your life. There is something else deeply significant in this story, and it concerns the altar that had been torn down. Before Elijah could call fire down from heaven, he had to rebuild what was broken. He gathered 12 stones and reconstructed the altar with his own hands. Spiritually speaking, this represents an important truth. Sometimes God asks us to participate in the rebuilding of what has been broken in our own lives. before he releases the fullness of his answer. This does not mean you must earn God's love or work your way into his favor, because his love for you was never something you had to earn in the first place. But it does mean that healing often involves a partnership. God provides the fire, the rain, the miracle, but he often invites us to gather the stones, to take small steps of faith to rebuild the places in our hearts that fear and disappointment have torn down. Perhaps for you, rebuilding the altar looks like choosing to pray again after months of silence, even when your words feel clumsy and uncertain. Perhaps it looks like forgiving someone who hurt you deeply, releasing the bitterness so that healing has room to grow. Perhaps it looks like taking one small practical step toward the breakthrough you have been praying for, even while you wait for God to do what only he can do. The stones you gather may feel small and insignificant on their own, but when placed together with faith, they become the very altar upon which God's fire will fall. Now let us speak of the water that Elijah poured over the offering, not once but 3 times, until it filled the trench completely. This detail is often overlooked, yet it carries profound meaning. Elijah deliberately made the situation more difficult before asking God to answer. He soaked the offering so thoroughly that any natural explanation for fire became impossible. Spiritually, this teaches us that God is not intimidated by impossible circumstances. In fact, he often allows situations in our lives to become so clearly beyond human explanation, so evidently impossible by natural means, precisely so that when the answer comes, no one, including you, can attribute it to coincidence or luck. If your situation feels utterly impossible right now, if the water has been poured again and again, until every ounce of natural hope seems drenched and drowned, take heart. This may be the very setting in which God is preparing to display his glory most clearly. There is also a beautiful truth found in the timing of this story. Elijah waited 3.5 years for the drought to end. He did not rush ahead of God's timing, nor did he give up during the long waiting. He remained faithful in hidden seasons, by the brook, in the widow's home, trusting that God's timing, though slow by human standards, was never late. Beloved chosen one, I know how difficult it can be to wait when everything within you longs for immediate relief. I know how heavy the weight of unanswered prayer can feel, especially when weeks stretch into months, and months stretch into years. But this story reminds us that God's silence is never God's absence, and God's delay is never God's denial. He was working through every season, even the driest ones, preparing the exact moment for the fire to fall and the rain to follow. Consider also the mockery Elijah faced while the prophets of Baal danced and cried out for hours with no response. It would have been easy for Elijah to feel foolish standing alone, waiting for his moment while everyone around him grew louder in their desperation. Perhaps you have felt this way too, quietly holding on to your faith while others around you seem to have moved on, embraced different paths, or grown louder in their doubt. Standing firm in faith while surrounded by uncertainty is one of the most difficult things a person can do, yet it is often exactly what God is asking of his chosen ones in seasons like this. What is God truly saying to you through this ancient story today? He is saying that your current dryness is not permanent. He is saying that the altar of your heart, though torn down by disappointment, fear, or exhaustion, can be rebuilt, stone by stone, through small acts of renewed faith. He is saying that even the most impossible situations, drenched again and again in hopelessness, are not beyond his reach. And most importantly, he is saying that his final answer is coming, not as a whisper, lost among many other voices, but as an undeniable fire that will leave no doubt in your heart that he alone is the living God who sees you, hears you, and has never once abandoned you. I want you to sit with this truth for a moment. The people on that mountain had grown so accustomed to disappointment that when the fire finally fell, their immediate response was to fall to the ground in awe. Not because they had never believed in a God at all, but because they had forgotten what it felt like to witness him move so clearly, so powerfully, so personally. Perhaps that is where you are today. Not someone who has abandoned faith entirely, but someone who has simply forgotten what it feels like for God to move powerfully in your own story. This message today is meant to reignite that memory, to remind your soul what it feels like to stand in awe of a God who still answers, who still shows up, who still sends fire when the moment is right. As we continue this journey together, I want to introduce you to a story, one crafted to reflect the same truths we have just uncovered. A story of someone who walked through a long season of dryness, disappointment, and doubt, yet discovered, much like Elijah, that God's silence was never the end of the story. If this message has named something real in you, consider pressing like so. It travels to the next person who need to be named and seen today. Leave a word in the comments, anything at all, as a way of marking that you were here, that you showed up for yourself, that you did not let this moment pass without receiving it. And if someone comes to mind who has been struggling to find stillness in a noisy season, sharing this with them may be the most quietly powerful thing you do this week. There is a link in the pinned comment. If you feel moved to leave a blessing for the next chosen one who finds their way here without the means to go further alone. And if you want to remain part of this community of chosen ones, subscribing is simply choosing to stay. Now, if what I have described in these past few minutes has found you, if you recognize yourself in the signs and in the pain and in the repositioning that has been happening in your life, I want to invite you to do one simple thing. Type the word ready in the comments, not as a performance, as a declaration. Because you are. There was a woman named Miriam, though her real name has been changed here to protect her story, who lived a life that many people watching this message today might recognize in their own experience. For many years, Miriam had worked faithfully, saved carefully, and prayed consistently for stability in her finances. She was not asking for extravagant wealth. She simply longed for enough to cover her bills without fear, enough to help her aging mother with medical costs, enough to breathe without the constant tightness in her chest every time an unexpected expense appeared. Yet season after season, it seemed as though every step forward was met by 2 steps backward. A car repair would drain her savings just as she managed to rebuild them. A sudden reduction in hours at her job would arrive right when she believed stability was finally within reach. For nearly 4 years, Miriam prayed the same prayer, almost identical to the number of years Elijah waited through the drought. She would kneel beside her bed at night, exhausted from another long day, whisper words that had grown almost automatic through repetition, yet were no less sincere. She would ask God simply to see her, to remember her, to not let her be forgotten in the middle of her struggle. There were nights she cried herself to sleep, wondering if her prayers were reaching any further than the ceiling above her bed. There were mornings she woke up and, before opening her eyes fully, felt the familiar weight of worry settle back onto her chest like a blanket she never asked to wear. During this season, Miriam also carried a quieter kind of pain. She had been engaged once, years earlier, to a man she deeply loved, only to have that relationship end suddenly and painfully when he chose to walk away without much explanation. The wound from that betrayal lingered long after the relationship ended, causing her to guard her heart carefully, almost too carefully, from anyone who tried to get close afterward. She told herself she was simply being wise, protecting herself from further heartbreak. Yet deep down she wondered if she would ever trust again, if she would ever open her heart fully to someone without immediately preparing for disappointment. One particular evening, after receiving another unexpected bill in the mail, Miriam sat on the edge of her bed, overwhelmed, and finally allowed herself to say aloud the question she had been avoiding for years. She asked God directly, almost accusingly, why He seemed to be silent while she suffered, why the same struggles kept repeating themselves, why, if she was truly seen and chosen as she had been taught to believe since childhood, her life continued to feel like an endless cycle of near breakthroughs followed by fresh setbacks. That night, exhausted from crying, Miriam fell asleep, with her Bible still open on her lap, resting upon a page she had not intentionally turned to. When she woke the next morning, her eyes fell upon the words open before her, from the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 3, which spoke of a vision that had an appointed time and would not lie, and though it lingered, to wait for it, because it would surely come and would not delay. Something about those specific words struck her differently than they ever had before. Though it lingered, though it tarries, yet it will surely come. It felt as though those words had been written specifically for her exhausted, weary heart on that exact morning. From that day forward, Miriam did not receive an instant financial miracle. Her circumstances did not transform overnight into effortless abundance, but something inside her began to shift. Instead of praying with exhausted desperation, she began praying with quiet, steady confidence. Much like Elijah standing before the fire, uncertain of the outcome yet unwavering in his trust of who God had already proven himself to be through smaller, quieter provisions along the way. She began keeping a simple journal, writing down every small provision she noticed. An unexpected discount at the grocery store, a friend who offered to help without being asked, a moment of unexpected peace during a particularly stressful afternoon. These small things, much like the ravens feeding Elijah by the brook, were not the full answer she longed for, but they were proof that she had not been forgotten in the waiting. Nearly 8 months after that morning, with the open Bible, Miriam received an unexpected opportunity, a promotion within her company that she had not even applied for, offered to her because her manager had noticed her consistent dedication over the difficult years prior. The increase in income was not overwhelming, but it was enough to breathe again, enough to help her mother without panic, enough to finally feel a sense of stability she had almost forgotten was possible. Around this same season, she also found herself slowly opening her heart again, allowing a new friendship to grow into something deeper, not rushed, not desperate, but gentle and rebuilt stone by stone, much like the altar Elijah reconstructed before the fire fell. Miriam's story reminds us of something powerful for anyone walking through financial hardship today. If you have been praying for provision, for stability, for relief from the constant weight of financial pressure, know that your prayers have not gone unheard. The appointed time Habakkuk speaks of has not been canceled, even if it has lingered longer than you hoped. And if you, like Miriam, have been guarding your heart carefully after betrayal, afraid to trust again, afraid to hope again, know that healing does not require you to rush. It simply requires you to remain open to the slow, patient rebuilding that God specializes in. Perhaps you are also someone who feels forgotten in the middle of exhaustion, someone who has been carrying a heavy burden, largely alone, showing up faithfully to work, to family responsibilities, to daily obligations, while quietly wondering if anyone notices how tired you truly are. I want you to hear this clearly. God notices. He noticed every quiet tear Miriam cried before her breakthrough came. He notices every quiet tear you have cried as well. The waiting you are walking through right now is not empty. It is not meaningless. It is the spaces where God is rebuilding the altar of your life, stone by stone, preparing for the exact moment when fire will fall and rain will follow. Now that we have walked through both the ancient story of Elijah and the reflective story of Miriam, let us turn our attention to practical signs, ways you can recognize when God is preparing you for your own final answer, your own fire falling from heaven after a long season of waiting. These signs are not meant to create anxious searching, constantly wondering if every small event carries hidden significance. Rather, they are meant to help you recognize God's fingerprints in ordinary details of your life, so that when your breakthrough arrives, you will recognize it clearly, rather than dismissing it as coincidence. The first sign to watch for is quiet provision during the waiting season. Just as ravens fed Elijah and a widow's jar never ran dry, God often provides small, seemingly insignificant forms of sustenance during our seasons of struggle. Perhaps this looks like an unexpected kindness from a stranger, a small financial gift arriving exactly when needed, or an opportunity appearing that eases a burden even slightly. If you have been walking through financial hardship, pay attention to these small provisions. They are not the final answer, but they are proof that you are being sustained even in the dryness, proof that God has not stepped away from your story. The second sign involves an increasing sense of internal restlessness paired with a growing clarity of purpose. Often, right before a significant breakthrough, there is a stirring within the heart, an increasing unwillingness to remain passive in the waiting. Elijah did not remain hidden by the brook forever. There came a moment when God said it was time to act, to gather the people, to build the altar, to prepare the offering. If you have recently felt a growing urge to take a specific step of faith, whether that means reaching out to rebuild a broken relationship, applying for an opportunity that once felt too intimidating, or simply beginning to pray with renewed intention after a long period of spiritual dryness, pay close attention to that restlessness. It may very well be God preparing you to actively participate in your own breakthrough. The third sign to recognize is the presence of mockery or doubt from those around you, paired with an unusual, unexplainable steadiness within yourself. Elijah stood surrounded by nearly 900 voices who mocked his faith, yet something within him remained unshaken. If you have found yourself surrounded by people who seem to have given up on believing that your situation could ever change, whether that is a difficult marriage, a prolonged health struggle, or a long-standing financial hardship, yet you notice within yourself a quiet, almost inexplicable steadiness that refuses to fully surrender to hopelessness. This is often a sign that God is strengthening your faith, specifically because your breakthrough is closer than it appears. The fourth practical application drawn from this story concerns the rebuilding of broken altars in your own life. I want you to take a moment and consider what areas of your heart or your circumstances feel broken right now, torn down by years of disappointment, betrayal, or exhaustion. Perhaps this is a friendship that fractured, a dream that was shattered, or simply your own confidence, worn thin by repeated setbacks. I encourage you to identify one small, tangible stone you can place today toward rebuilding that broken altar. This might mean sending a message to reconcile with someone you have been avoiding. It might mean writing down one dream you had abandoned and taking one small step toward it again. It might simply mean choosing today to pray honestly rather than avoiding prayer altogether out of frustration or fear. These small stones may feel insignificant on their own, yet together they form the altar upon which your fire will eventually fall. If you are someone currently facing grief, whether from losing a loved one, losing a relationship, or losing a version of your life you once expected to have, I want to speak directly to you now. Grief often creates a particular kind of dryness, one that feels less like drought and more like a heavy fog that refuses to lift. During this season, practical application may look different than active steps of faith. It may simply look like allowing yourself grace to grieve fully, without rushing the process, while still gently reaching towards small moments of connection with God, even if those moments feel brief or imperfect. God does not require polished, eloquent prayers during grief. Sometimes the most honest prayer is simply sitting quietly, allowing Him to be near to your broken-hearted spirit, exactly as promised in Psalm 34, verse 18, which we reflected on earlier in this message. For those currently experiencing unemployment or professional uncertainty, I want to gently remind you that seasons of waiting professionally often serve a deeper purpose than immediate provision alone. Elijah's time by the brook, though difficult, prepared him spiritually for the far greater task that awaited him on Mount Carmel. Perhaps this season of professional uncertainty, though undeniably stressful, is quietly preparing you for an opportunity or a version of yourself that would not have been ready to emerge without this waiting period. This does not mean the stress you feel is not real or valid. It simply means the waiting is not wasted, even when it feels that way. As you reflect on these signs and applications, I encourage you to hold gently onto this truth that recognizing these signs is not about achieving perfection in your faith or flawlessly executing every step correctly. Elijah himself, shortly after this dramatic victory on Mount Carmel, experienced deep exhaustion and even despair, fleeing into the wilderness and asking God to take his life. Even after witnessing fire fall from heaven, Elijah remained profoundly human, capable of both extraordinary faith and overwhelming weariness. If you find yourself moving between moments of strong faith and moments of deep exhaustion, know that this does not disqualify you from being chosen. It simply confirms that you are exactly the kind of person God has always used throughout history. Imperfect, weary, still deeply loved, and still deeply chosen. As we move forward together into the emotional heart of this message, I want you to carry these signs with you gently, not as a checklist to anxiously measure yourself against, but as gentle reminders that God is actively working within the details of your life. Even the small, seemingly insignificant ones, preparing you steadily for the undeniable, unmistakable fire that is coming. Beloved chosen one, we now arrive at the very heart of this message, the place where every promise, every ancient story, and every quiet whisper of heaven converges into one undeniable truth. God has never abandoned you, not for a single moment. Not during the driest season of your drought, not during the darkest night of your grief, not during the loneliest hour of your waiting. He has been present the entire time, closer than your own breath, closer than the ache in your chest that has learned to carry disappointment, as though it were a permanent companion. I want you to think again of Elijah standing upon that mountain, watching the prophets of Baal cry out for hours, with no response at all. Imagine the moment just before he rebuilt the altar, when doubt could have easily crept into his heart. Imagine how it must have felt to stand alone, publicly, with nearly 900 voices against him, wondering if this would be the day his faith was finally proven foolish. And yet he did not collapse under that pressure, because somewhere deep within him lived the memory of every raven that fed him, every drop of oil that never ran dry, every quiet provision that had carried him through years of hiding. Those small, seemingly forgotten mercies became the foundation upon which his faith stood firm in the moment that mattered most. Chosen one, I want you to gather your own memories now, the same way Elijah gathered his. Think back to every moment in your life when something impossible suddenly became possible. Think of every unexpected provision, every surprising comfort, every stranger who appeared exactly when you needed them. Every time your body healed from something that frightened you, every relationship that mended after you believed it was beyond repair. These memories were never accidents. They were quiet proofs. Small altars built long before this moment, preparing you for the fire that is falling even now. There is a temptation, especially during long seasons of hardship, to believe that God's silence means his absence. But silence was never absence. When a mother watches her child take their very first steps, she often stays quiet, not because she has stopped caring, but because she is watching closely, ready to catch them the moment they stumble. God's silence during your waiting has never meant indifference. It has meant careful, attentive watching, his eyes fixed upon you the entire time, ready to catch you the very moment you needed him most. Perhaps you are someone who has whispered, in your most honest and unguarded moments, a question that felt almost too dangerous to ask aloud. Where were you, God, when everything fell apart? Where were you when the diagnosis came? Where were you when the marriage ended? Where were you when the job disappeared and the bills piled higher than you could climb? I want to answer that question for you now, not with empty comfort, but with the same certainty Elijah carried onto that mountain. He was there. He was present in the waiting room when you feared the worst. He was present in the empty side of the bed when loneliness felt unbearable. He was present in the silence after the phone call that changed everything. He did not away from your suffering. He entered into it with you, quietly, patiently, preparing the exact moment when his presence would become undeniable. There is a passage found in the book of Isaiah, chapter 43, verse 2, that speaks directly to this truth. It says that when you pass through the waters, he will be with you, and through the rivers, they will not overwhelm you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, nor will the flames consume you. Read that carefully, beloved. This verse does not promise the absence of difficulty. It promises presence within difficulty. It does not say you will avoid the waters or escape the fire entirely. It says that whatever waters you pass through, whatever fire you walk through, you will not be overwhelmed and you will not be consumed. This is the emotional center of everything God is saying to you today. He is not promising an easy life free of struggle. He is promising his unshakable presence in the middle of every struggle you face. I want you to consider something remarkable about the fire that fell upon Elijah's altar. It did not simply light the wood. It consumed the offering, the wood, the stones, and even the water that filled the trench. Nothing was left untouched. Nothing remained the same after that fire fell. This is often how God's presence works in our lives as well. When he finally reveals himself undeniably in a season of struggle, he does not simply provide a small, partial relief. He often transforms everything. The very stones of our foundation, the very water of our doubts, all of it consumed and remade by his presence. If you have been praying for a small fix, a temporary patch to hold your life together, prepare yourself instead for something far greater. God is not interested in simply patching your brokenness. He is interested in consuming it entirely and rebuilding something new from the ashes. Perhaps grief has been your companion for longer than you ever expected. Perhaps you have lost someone whose absence still catches you off guard in quiet, unexpected moments, a familiar song playing on the radio, a certain smell that brings back a flood of memories, an empty chair at the dinner table, that no one else seems to notice the way you do. I want to speak gently into that grief right now. God has not asked you to rush through this pain. He has not demanded that you pretend to be healed before you truly are. But I want you to know that even within your grief, He remains present, gathering every tear, as Psalm 56 verse 8 beautifully describes, where it says that God keeps track of all your sorrows, collecting all your tears in His bottle, recording each one in His book. Every tear you have cried has been seen, counted, and held with the tenderest care by the same God who allowed fire to fall upon a soaked altar centuries ago. If financial hardship has been crushing you slowly, quietly, relentlessly, I want you to hear this truth as well. The same God who multiplied a widow's flour and oil during a devastating famine is fully capable of multiplying whatever little you currently hold in your hands. Your current lack is not a reflection of God's inability or unwillingness to provide. It is simply the space before multiplication, the trench being filled with water before the fire falls and reveals what was true all along. That scarcity was never the final word over your life. And if loneliness has settled into your bones after betrayal, after heartbreak, after years of protecting your heart so carefully that it has almost forgotten how to fully open again, I want you to receive this truth deeply. God specializes in rebuilding broken altars. He took 12 scattered stones and formed them into something whole again. He is fully capable of taking the scattered, broken pieces of your trust and rebuilding them into something whole as well, not through rushing the process, but through patient, gentle restoration, one stone at a time. This is the emotional climax of everything we have walked through together today. God has never once abandoned you, not during your driest season, not during your loneliest night, not during your most desperate prayer. He has been closer than your next breath this entire time, watching, sustaining, preparing, waiting for the exact moment to reveal Himself undeniably in your story, just as He did upon that ancient mountain. And beloved, I believe with everything within me that this moment, right now, as you listen to these words, may very well be the beginning of that revealing. Chosen ones do not simply receive what is coming to them and stop there. They carry it forward and multiply it. And every person who has found their way to this message today is part of a movement that no single waiting season could contain. If what has been described here today has stirred something real in you, consider pressing like, not as a favor to this channel, but as an act of choosing to be part of what is being built, a wave of chosen ones waking up to what has already moved on their behalf. Drop a word in the comments as a signal to the others who are watching, so they know they are not alone in sensing the ground shift beneath them. And if someone is on your mind who is still in the thick of their waiting season and needs to know the ground is already shifting beneath them too, share this with them today. Choose to stay at this table by subscribing, not as a platform action, but as a decision to remain in this community through what comes next. And if you feel moved to sow into the ground that is growing something for the next person in line, the donation link is in the pinned comment below. Type the word "I am ready" in the comments if what has been described today matches what you have been sensing in your spirit. Let those words be your declaration that you are no longer waiting to believe it. Let us now ground everything we have felt in this message within the unshakable authority of Scripture itself. Because feelings alone, however powerful, must always be anchored in the eternal truth of God's Word. What we have walked through together today is not simply an emotional experience meant to comfort you temporarily. It is a truth deeply rooted in the very promises God has spoken across generations, promises that remain just as true and just as alive for you today as they were for those who first received them. The first verse I want to place gently into your heart comes from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 11, where God speaks directly to his people during a season of exile and uncertainty, saying that he knows the plans he has for them, plans for good and not for disaster, plans to give them a future and a hope. Notice that this promise was given during one of the most difficult seasons in Israel's history, a season of displacement, loss, and deep uncertainty about the future. And yet, in the middle of that darkness, God spoke a promise of hope. If you have felt as though your current circumstances have exiled you from the life you once imagined, know that this same promise belongs to you today. God's plans for you were never canceled by your current hardship. They were simply being carried out in a way your eyes cannot yet fully see. The second verse comes from the book of Lamentations, chapter 3, verses 22 and 23, which reminds us that because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail, and they are new every single morning, for great is his faithfulness. This verse was written in the middle of unimaginable devastation, as the writer mourned the destruction of Jerusalem itself. Yet even there, surrounded by ashes and ruin, the writer found reason to declare God's faithfulness as new every morning. Beloved, whatever ashes surround your own life right now, whatever ruins remain from broken relationships, lost opportunities, or shattered dreams, his mercies toward you are being renewed this very morning and every morning that follows. The third verse I want to highlight comes from the book of Romans, chapter 8, verse 28, which tells us that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. This does not mean every difficult circumstance you face was directly caused by God. Nor does it mean every painful season was somehow good in itself. It means that God is skillfully weaving even painful circumstances into a larger tapestry of purpose, much like years Elijah spent hidden by the brook and in the widow's home, seasons that seemed small and insignificant at the time, yet were quietly preparing him for the far greater moment that awaited him on Mount Carmel. The fourth verse comes from the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 4, verses 16 through 18, which encourages us not to lose heart. For though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day, and our present troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. This verse acknowledges honestly that our outward circumstances may indeed feel like they are wasting away, whether through illness, exhaustion, grief, or hardship. Yet it promises an inward renewal happening simultaneously, often invisible to the human eye, yet deeply real and deeply active within your spirit. The fifth verse I want to place before you comes from the book of Zephaniah, chapter 3, verse 17, which declares that the Lord your God is with you, the mighty warrior who saves, that he will take great delight in you, that he will quiet you with his love, and that he will rejoice over you with singing. I want you to sit with this verse a little longer than the others, beloved, because it reveals something tender about the heart of God that is easy to overlook during seasons of hardship. He does not simply tolerate your presence, nor does he watch over you with distant obligation. He delights in you. He rejoices over you. He sings over you the way a parent softly sings over a sleeping child, full of love that requires nothing in return. The sixth verse comes from the book of Psalm 40, verses 1 through 3, which describes waiting patiently for the Lord, who then turned and heard the cry for help, lifting the writer out of a pit of despair, out of the mud and mire, setting their feet upon a rock, giving them a firm place to stand, and putting a new song of praise in their mouth. This psalm mirrors the very journey we have walked through together today, waiting. crying out, feeling stuck in mud and mire, and eventually being lifted onto solid, unshakable ground. If you currently feel stuck in your own version of mud and mire, whether that is depression, financial hardship, grief, or exhaustion, know that this same lifting is being prepared for you even now. And the 7th verse I want to leave with you comes from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 5, where God declares that He is making all things new. Not simply patching what is broken, not simply repairing what is damaged, but making entirely new. This is the ultimate promise woven throughout every story, every testimony, and every scripture we have explored today. Whatever feels shattered in your life right now is not beyond the reach of a God who specializes in making all things new. Beloved chosen one, these 7 scriptures are not simply beautiful words meant to be admired from a distance. They are living promises meant to be carried with you, whispered over your circumstances during moments of doubt, spoken aloud during sleepless nights, and remembered every single time the enemy of your soul tries to convince you that you have been forgotten. Let these words settle deeply into your spirit now, because they form the unshakable foundation upon which everything else in this message stands. Now, beloved, I want to invite you into a quiet moment of prayer with me, not as a distant recitation of words, but as a genuine, heartfelt conversation between your soul and the God who has been present with you this entire time. Wherever you are right now, whether sitting quietly, driving, resting, or simply listening with your eyes closed, I invite you to let your heart soften as we bring this prayer together before heaven. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with hearts that are honest about our weariness. We do not pretend to have it all together. We do not pretend that the waiting has been easy or that the disappointments have not left their mark upon our spirits. We come to you exactly as we are, tired, uncertain, and yet still hoping, because something deep within us knows that you have never once abandoned us, even during the driest, most silent seasons of our lives. Lord, for every person listening to this prayer who has been waiting for a breakthrough that feels long overdue, I ask that you would renew their strength today, just as you sustained Elijah through ravens and through a widow's jar that never ran dry. Sustain them now through whatever small provisions they need, financial, emotional, physical, or spiritual. Remind them gently that their current lack is not the final word over their story. For every person carrying grief that others may have already forgotten, but which still weighs heavily upon their heart, I ask that you would draw especially close to them today. Let them feel, in whatever way their spirit can receive it, that you are near to the brokenhearted, that every tear they have cried has been collected and remembered by you, and that healing, though slow, is not impossible. For every person who has been betrayed, whether by a partner, a friend, or someone they once trusted deeply, I ask that you would begin the gentle process of rebuilding trust within their heart. Not rushed, not forced, but patiently, stone by stone, the way Elijah rebuilt the wall before fire fell. Help them release the fear that keeps them guarded and replace it slowly with the courage to love and trust again. For every person facing unemployment, financial strain, or professional uncertainty, I ask that you would open doors that no one else can open, and close doors that would only lead to further harm. Give them peace in the waiting and clarity in the moments when action is required. Remind them that seasons of professional dryness are often quietly preparing them for opportunities they cannot yet see. Lord, for anyone who has quietly wondered if they even matter to you anymore, anyone who has whispered in the dark, wondering if their prayers are too small, too repetitive, or too insignificant to reach your ears, I ask that you would silence that lie completely today. Remind them, in a way only you can, that they were chosen not because they are flawless, but because you looked upon their brokenness and called them yours anyway. Father, we ask that you would rebuild every broken altar within us today. Wherever disappointment has torn down our confidence, rebuild it. Wherever betrayal has torn down our trust, rebuild it. Wherever exhaustion has torn down our hope, rebuild it. And once that altar is rebuilt, we ask that you would send your fire down upon it, undeniable, unmistakable, consuming every doubt, every fear, every lie that has kept us bound during this long season of waiting. We thank you, Lord, that you are not a distant God who simply observes our suffering from far away. We thank you that you entered into the waters and the fire alongside us, exactly as Isaiah 43 promised, refusing to let us be overwhelmed or consumed. We thank you that your mercies are new every single morning, that your compassions never fail, and that even now, in this very moment, you are working all things together for our good, according to your purpose. Lord, we release our grip on our own timing today. We surrender our desire to control exactly how and when the answer arrives, and we choose instead to trust the same God who allowed fire to fall after 3.5 long years of drought. We believe that our own drought, however long it has lasted, is not the end of the story. We believe that rain is coming. We believe that fire is falling even now, quietly, invisibly, preparing the moment when it will become undeniably clear to us as well. Thank you, Father, for choosing us, not because we earned it, but because your love has never depended on our performance. Thank you for seeing every tear, every sleepless night, every quiet prayer whispered in desperation. Thank you for being closer than our next breath, even during the silence that once felt so heavy. We receive your final message today, not as an ending, but as a new beginning, written in mercy, sealed in love, and delivered exactly when our hearts needed it most, in your holy and faithful name we pray, amen. Beloved chosen one, having prayed together, I want to gently guide you now into a season of healing and awakening, the kind of quiet inner renewal that often follows a powerful spiritual encounter. Remember that after the fire fell upon Mount Carmel, after the rain finally returned to the land, Elijah did not immediately step into a season of constant strength and unwavering confidence. In fact, shortly afterward, he fled into the wilderness, exhausted and overwhelmed, asking God to simply let him die beneath a solitary broom tree. This detail matters greatly for your own healing journey, because it reveals a beautiful, often overlooked truth. Even after witnessing an undeniable miracle, even after experiencing the very presence of God in the most dramatic way imaginable, Elijah remained deeply human, capable of profound exhaustion and emotional collapse. If you find yourself, even after receiving this message today, still feeling weary, still feeling uncertain about how quickly your circumstances will change, please release any shame you might feel about that weariness. Healing is rarely a single dramatic moment that instantly erases years of accumulated pain. It is often a slow, gentle unfolding, much like the way God cared for Elijah after his collapse beneath the broom tree. Scripture tells us that after Elijah fell asleep in his exhaustion, an angel touched him and told him simply to get up and eat. Elijah ate, drank, and lay back down to sleep again. The angel returned a second time, again gently instructing him to eat, because the journey ahead would be too much for him otherwise. Notice how tender this moment is, beloved. God did not scold Elijah for his exhaustion. He did not demand that Elijah immediately snap back into strength and confidence. He simply provided rest, nourishment, and gentle patience, meeting Elijah exactly where he was, in his weakest, most human moment. This is precisely how God desires to meet you during your own season of healing. He is not demanding that you immediately feel completely restored the moment this message ends. He is simply inviting you to rest, to receive nourishment for your spirit, and to trust that strength will return in its proper time, just as it did for Elijah. After being strengthened by this food, Elijah traveled 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, where he sought shelter in a cave. It was there that God asked him a piercing question. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" In response, Elijah poured out his heart honestly, expressing his exhaustion, his sense of being utterly alone in his faith, and his feeling that his efforts had ultimately accomplished nothing worthwhile. God did not rebuke this honesty. Instead, he instructed Elijah to stand on the mountain, for the Lord was about to pass by. A powerful wind tore through the mountains, shattering rocks before the Lord, yet Scripture tells us the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind came an earthquake, yet the Lord was not in the earthquake either. After the earthquake came fire, yet even there, the Lord was not present in the fire. And then, after the fire, came a gentle whisper, sometimes translated as a still small voice. It was in that quiet whisper that God's presence was finally found. This detail is profoundly significant for your own healing journey, beloved. Sometimes we expect God's presence and answers to always arrive dramatically, through obvious miracles, undeniable signs, or powerful demonstrations similar to the fire that fell upon the altar earlier in Elijah's story. But healing and awakening often arrive far more quietly, in a gentle whisper, rather than a dramatic wind or earthquake. Perhaps your own healing will not arrive through one overwhelming, obvious miracle, but through a quiet, gradual awakening, small whispers of peace breaking through anxiety, small moments of unexpected joy break through grief, small sparks of renewed hope breaking through discouragement. I want to gently encourage you, during this season of healing, to begin paying closer attention to these quiet whispers within your own life. Perhaps it is a moment of unexpected laughter breaking through a difficult week. Perhaps it is a sudden sense of peace settling over your heart during a quiet morning, without any obvious explanation. Perhaps it is a gentle nudge encouraging you to reach out to someone, to try something new, to take one small step forward that you had previously been too afraid to take. These quiet whispers are often exactly where God's healing presence chooses to dwell. Healing also often involves releasing burdens we were never meant to carry alone. Just as God gently nourished Elijah before asking him to continue his journey, I want to invite you to release, even now, any burden you have been carrying entirely by yourself. Perhaps this means finally reaching out for support, whether through prayer, through a trusted friend, through community, or through professional guidance if that is something you need. There is no shame in needing support during your healing journey. Even one of the greatest prophets in Scripture needed rest, nourishment, and gentle companionship after his most dramatic spiritual encounter. As you continue moving forward from this message today, I encourage you to hold on to this truth gently, that healing is not a single event, but a continuous journey of small, quiet awakenings. You do not need to have everything figured out immediately. You do not need to feel completely restored the moment this message ends. You simply need to remain open to the still small whispers of God's presence, trusting that just as fire once fell dramatically upon a mountain altar, and just as a gentle whisper once met a prophet's exhausted heart in a quiet cave, God's healing presence is meeting you exactly where you are today, patiently, tenderly, and completely. If you have been using the Genius Wave audio that I mentioned at the beginning of this message and returned to throughout, I want to speak to that directly now. What you have been doing in those 7 minutes each day is participating in the same movement I have been describing throughout this entire message. The movement of a chosen one coming back to the full signal of what they were created to carry. The gamma frequency that Dr. James Rivers spent over 30 years learning how to restore is not separate from the spiritual reality we have been navigating together. It is the neurological expression of the same truth. You were made for more than the suppressed, depleted, survival mode frequency that a long season of hardship can reduce you to. And the restoration of that frequency is not a luxury or a self-improvement project. It is a practical act of spiritual readiness. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, and you know it is a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. Now I want to say thank you, not as a formality, not as a closing ritual, but as a genuine acknowledgement of what it cost you to show up here today. Because showing up for a message like this one is not passive. It requires a willingness to be seen that not everyone in your life has been practicing. It requires a trust that something real might be waiting in this space. And after a long season of reaching for things that did not arrive on schedule, that trust is not cheap. You brought something real here today. You brought your honest self with the weight you have been carrying and the hope you have been protecting and the questions you have not been able to fully answer, and you let this message meet you in that place. That matters. That is not nothing all across the world. Right now, other chosen ones are sitting with exactly what you are sitting with. They arrived at this same message through entirely different circumstances, through different searches and different recommendations and different moments of reaching for something more than they could not name, and they found themselves here at the same words, feeling the same stirring, setting down the same weight at the same threshold. You are not alone in this. You have never been alone in this. And the community of chosen ones that is gathering around this message, the ones who typed a word in the comments, and the ones who shared this with someone who needed it, and the ones who are sitting in the quiet of their own recognition right now, that community is real, and it is yours, and it belongs to you as much as you belong to it. Something real was built here today, in the space between my voice and your heart, and it belongs to both of us now. If this message has meant something to you, pressing like is a way of saying so without needing words, a quiet acknowledgement that something true happened here. Leaving something in the comments means that no chosen one who finds this message later has to feel like they arrived alone, because your words will be there, marking that someone came before them and recognized the same thing and stayed. And if there is one person in your life who is still in the middle of what you are coming out of, sharing this with them is the simplest and most powerful act of love you can offer someone who is still waiting for their season to shift. If you feel moved to remain in this community of chosen ones who are waking up together, subscribing is the way you choose to stay at the table rather than passing through. And if something in what you received here today feels like it wants to be passed forward, there is a way to do that in the pinned comment quietly and without pressure, simply leaving something behind for the next person who finds their way here and needs it. Type the words "I see it" in the comments if this message has seen you today. Beloved chosen one, as we draw this message toward its close, I want to gather together everything we have walked through so that these truths remain firmly planted within your heart long after this message ends. We began by reminding you that you are here today not by accident, but by divine design, chosen not because you are flawless, but because God looked upon your brokenness and called you his own. We journeyed through the ancient story of a prophet named Elijah, who endured 3.5 long years of drought, hidden provision, and quiet preparation before standing boldly upon a mountain and witnessing fire fall undeniably from heaven. We explored the deep spiritual meaning behind that story, discovering that seasons of dryness are never wasted, that broken altars can always be rebuilt, and that impossible circumstances are never too impossible for God to answer. We walked alongside Miriam, a woman who waited faithfully through years of financial hardship and quiet heartbreak, discovering that small, seemingly insignificant provisions were proof that she had never truly been forgotten. We uncovered practical signs to help you recognize God's quiet movement within your own circumstances, from unexpected provision to restless stirrings of faith to the steady courage to rebuild what was broken, one small stone at a time. We reached the emotional climax of this message together, reminding you that God has never once abandoned you. Not during your driest season, not during your loneliest night, not during your most desperate whispered prayer. We grounded these truths firmly within the unshakable authority of Scripture, from Jeremiah's promise of hope and a future, to Lamentations' declaration of mercies renewed every single morning, to Romans' assurance that God works all things together for good. We prayed together honestly and openly, releasing our grip on our own timing and asking God to rebuild every broken altar within us so that His fire might fall undeniably upon our lives as well. And finally, we explored the tender, often overlooked truth that healing rarely arrives through dramatic wind, earthquake, or fire alone, but often through a gentle, quiet whisper, patiently meeting us exactly where we are. Beloved, if you have walked through this entire message with an open heart, I believe something within you has shifted, even if only slightly, even if you cannot yet fully explain how or why. Perhaps the heavy weight you carried when you first pressed play feels just a little lighter now. Perhaps the silence that once felt so unbearable now feels, even in a small way, like sacred preparation rather than abandonment. Perhaps the drought you have been walking through no longer feels quite as endless, knowing that fire has fallen before and rain has followed before, and it can happen again. In your own life, in your own time, according to God's perfect and faithful timing. Before we close, I want to gently ask you for something. If this message has spoken to your heart today, if you have felt even a small spark of renewed hope stirring within you, I want to invite you to like this video, to subscribe to this channel, and to share this message with someone else who might desperately need to hear these same words today. You never know who might be walking through their own version of drought right now, wondering if God has forgotten them, wondering if their prayers are too small, too repetitive, or too insignificant to matter. Your simple act of sharing this message could become the very ravens that feed someone else through their own season of hiding, the very widow's jar that never runs dry for someone else's family, the very final note that God uses to remind another chosen one that they have never been forgotten. As we close this message together, I want to leave you with a final blessing, spoken over your life exactly as it is today, with all its unanswered questions, all its quiet exhaustion, and all its patient, persistent hope. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace, not the fragile peace the world offers, but the deep, unshakable peace that comes from knowing you are fully known, fully seen, and fully loved by the God who formed you. May every drought in your life be broken by unexpected rain. May every broken altar within your heart be rebuilt, stone by stone, through gentle, patient restoration. May the fire of God's undeniable presence fall upon every impossible circumstance you currently face, consuming doubt, consuming fear, consuming every lie that has ever told you that you were forgotten. And may you carry, from this day forward, the quiet, unshakable certainty that you are, and have always been, God's chosen one, seen fully, loved deeply, and never once abandoned, not for a single moment, not through the driest season, not through the darkest night, not through the longest silence. This is God's final message to you today, beloved. Not an ending, but a beginning, written not in ink, but in mercy, sealed not with wax, but with a love that will never fail you. Go now in peace, carrying this truth deep within your spirit. And remember, always, that you were chosen. You are chosen, and you will remain chosen. For as long as your story continues to unfold within the faithful, unshakable hands of the God who has never once let you go.